Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we are talking all about how to deal with challenges and obstacles in your life so that you can see them as positive stepping stones rather than roadblocks that hold you back. Okay, David. So for most of us, when we encounter something very unfamiliar or very challenging, often we want to retreat, step back and shut down. Why is that almost like an automatic reaction for most people?
Well, if that's you that Alex has just said, this is when your inner child is in control. Many of my clients say, I don't know what's the inner child, David. So if you meet a challenge, a difficult situation, and you want to run away, if you want to avoid, if you want to shut down, this is the part of your subconscious mind that I would want to call the inner child. So this is the inner child believing that reality should be the way that they would like it to be. Everything runs smooth. Everything works out the way that they want it, when they want it, how they want it. And this teaching will be, I can tell you, just at the beginning, be about the inner child, because the inner child will not want to connect with the difficulty of reality. It will be saying something like, I shouldn't have to do that again. It's too tough for me. I've had enough problems in my life. I deserve things to go well now. And so it won't address that stepping stone as in the right way. It will see it more as a block.
And I guess also, not only is the reality, yes, this is unfamiliar. Yes, this is challenging. Yes, you're going to have a think and you maybe have to try harder to navigate this challenge or life issue. Of course, that's not to be denied. But I think not only does our inner child hate that because it wants everything easy, it wants everything familiar, no discomfort, but it also has a tendency to jump into worst case scenarios.
That's right.
Not only is this actually a challenge, but it's a challenge and it's all going to go wrong and it's all going to be a disaster and it's a challenge now, but it's all going to get worse. So it escalates the level of the problem.
Well, that's right. At the title, you wouldn't think that this was inner child work, but this is all inner child work. And so you've mentioned now a couple of times as something that's really important for the inner child, the known or the unknown, or the familiar and the unfamiliar. So what the child would really like to do is to be in control. You're the inner child part of your mind. So for those of you new to us, what I'm talking about is your subconscious mind, you may want to call it, or your ego, or the little negative self-talk that's in your mind. I want you to reframe that and think of that as an inner child. Think about it as you when you were around the age of 6, 7, 8. And this part of your mind wants to be future-proofed. It wants to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to react. And so it dislikes intensely the unfamiliar and the unknown. The problem being, and this is why Taoism and the teachings here are so important, we live in the unknown and the unfamiliar. That is one of the greatest wonders of our world. This is what we should totally embrace. We should love the unknown. We should love these challenges. And as you said into your introduction, see them as stepping stones, opportunity to learn, to grow, to reconnect with our Shen. Now, as you just heard me say that, there might be a little voice inside of your mind saying, what's he talking about? I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know I'm not going to fail. I want to know I'm going to be successful. I want to be perfect. I don't want surprises. And as Alex says at the beginning of this question, what it will do then, very cleverly, it will create worst case scenarios. If I tread in the unknown, my goodness, the roof's going to fall in. Let's stay with what we know, even if it isn't successful. That's the key for the inner child. The inner child will stay with the familiar even if it's not successful.
And of course, David, the whole teaching of Wu Wei, and I know you talk a lot about the analogy of the stream flowing down the river and encountering boulders in the stream before the water reaches the sea. Really, that our journey of life is about navigating those boulders, large or small, and dealing with them with as much ease, as much Wu Wei as we possibly can.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the fundamental teachings of Taoism, this concept, this idea of the river flowing down. And as you follow the path of the water, the way of the water, the Tao of the water, this water will encounter rocks and boulders and waterfalls and rapids. And it's how you navigate through those. And the purpose of these teachings is to be in your flow, to be at ease, to deal with every situation from a position of value and worth about yourself. Not trying to preempt what's going to happen, not bolting the barn door when the horse has fled, allowing yourself to flow, allowing yourself to meet the unknown, embracing the unknown. And this is absolutely what the inner child needs to be taught. You need to hold its hand. You need to give it that support. You need to be compassionate with yourself. So many of my clients are the direct opposite. Is this you? Do you CCJ, criticize, compare, and be judgmental about yourself and others? And what this does, it sets up a scenario where you're always thinking of problems. You're never looking at how to learn, how to grow, how to step up. You're in defense mode. You're putting the shutters up. You're shutting yourself down. You're building a wall, a prison, and you're locking yourself inside your own prison.
And do you think, David, that another misunderstanding that our ego or our inner child has, that, life, we've already said the inner child thinks we shouldn't have problems, we shouldn't have challenges, everything should be easy, straightforward, linear, direct. But is it also because the inner child is very much focused on the end goal, the destination, and it gets frustrated with challenges or diversions because it believes they're just, they have no value, they're just distractions, they're just slowing me down. And it's overly focused on what it believes as a goal, a destination, a status, point of status that it must achieve. And of course, all the while it's doing this CCJ, you're comparing yourself to your peers, your colleagues. They're doing better than me. They don't have to struggle with this challenge that I've got. And again, this way of thinking makes the whole problem worse. And then you're not actually clear-minded and rational in a good way to deal with the challenge.
You're absolutely right, Alex. And that really is the key of the problem, is to look at that subconscious mind that we're calling it an inner child. And that's why I think using the term the inner child is far more powerful, because this isn't some kind of a monster. This isn't something to set out to mess you up, to make your life difficult. But that part of your mind is thinking like a 6-year-old child. And a 6-year-old child is it's all about them. It's what they want. And I often say, and clients laugh, but it's very important, your inner child wants what it wants when it wants it. And it is not prepared to accept the flow of the river. It's not prepared to accept difficulties. It will give you so many reasons why it should, as you said, be easy. It will say, I've had enough difficulties. I've had enough misfortunes. I've had enough bad luck. I've had enough criticism. I do not deserve this. Things now should go right for me. I'll often get this when I'm working with a client. Their inner child thinks that life is like a book, like good and bad, pros and cons. And if you have two or three bad things happen to you, then you are owed. You deserve two or three good things to happen to you. And this is comparing. So the inner child is always looking for that comparing. And when it sees what it sees as injustice or unfairness, when it sees what it thinks things are stacking up against it, it then will say, it's not fair, this is not right, this is unjust. And just like a physical child, if you ever hear your physical child saying, Mummy, Daddy, it's not fair, what they're saying, it's not the way I want it. And that's why I love the analogy of the inner child. The inner child has a really clear idea how things should be. And if things aren't that way, it sees it as unfair. And this is the inner conflict, that why it doesn't believe that challenges, it doesn't even believe it should have a challenge. It should work out for them. I often say to clients, are you expecting like an emotional fairy godmother to waft into your life, sort out your problems, put them in a nice box, put a bow on them and say, there you are, all sorted. And really the inner child will say, yes, that's what I want.
And so, David, I think what we're talking about here is really the problem becomes the inner resistance. So this escalation, the reality is the challenge, the difficulty, the unfamiliar. But the real problem is the inner resistance, and that the key to reframing the whole thing and then tackling the problem and challenge proactively, positively is a measure of acceptance of reality. Not saying, oh, this is okay, this issue's happen, but accepting that it's happened and that it's like, okay, so what can I now do about this? How can I deal with this as positively, as rationally as possible in order to navigate through this rather than resisting it, which makes the problem worse.
I agree with you 100%. Exactly what you said was a great teaching. The situation is not the problem. The situation is the situation. If you just said, I'm just going to repeat you now, Alex, because you gave that teaching wonderfully. The situation is just the situation at hand, like the river flowing down. The boulder is the boulder. You can't shift the boulder. You've got to find a way around it. The problem lies in your perception of that challenge, of that situation, of that difficulty. And these may be great difficulty, redundancy, breakup in relationships, health, well-beings, children. I'm not saying they're little challenges, but they are challenges that have entered into your life. The problem comes is when you address those from a negative viewpoint, particularly if you address them from an emotional viewpoint, because instead of dealing with the problem, you've now doubled up and made it even worse, because now you have to deal with your emotions and the situation, the challenge, the problem, the issue, whatever you want to call it. So you're making it much harder for yourself. And so this is why the inner child work is so important. If you take time, and I'm only talking about 10 minutes a day, to do the work, to do the conversation, to reparent your inner child, the inner child will reframe, will change their perception on these boulders in your life. And they will be more flexible and happy to find a way around it, rather than hunching and dropping their shoulders and sighing and saying, there you go again. This always happens to me. Why does it always happen to me? This is not fair. Other people don't have this. And then you're making that issue 10 times worse. You're still dealing with it. This is what amazes me when clients say, I can't cope. I say, you've always coped. All we're talking about is the ease in which you cope, because you cope and make things much harder for yourself by your approach. So again, what you said, I'm just repeating you, Alex. It's your mindset. It's how you think. You can't live a life with no issues. That's impossible. That's wishful thinking. That's a utopian thinking. And that's why this is to do with the inner child.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And I will put a link in our show notes to our inner child video playlist, where there are many, many teachings in there, long form teachings that will help you with this subject. I really hope this has given you a new insight and perspective on dealing with the challenges that we all encounter in our lives. Please do let us know, and perhaps share the teaching with someone else who you think it may also help. David works every week with clients all over the world via Zoom video call on exactly these sort of topics. If you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one consultations, please also check out the show notes, and I will put a link there for those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we'd love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.